constant state of fear and misery. Don't understand anymore. Live in a constant state of fear and misery. Live in a constant state of fear and misery. Don't understand anymore.
Hi-ho, everybody. Today is Sunday, August 26th, episode number 122 at block height 538,583. What is going on?
Man, it's a beautiful Sunday, man. That's for sure. The smoke cleared up. We got that wildfire smoke came in here for a little bit, but it's cleared up now. It's a pretty beautiful Sunday. It's going pretty well. How about you, Janine? How you doing today?
I am trying to avoid getting pissed off at all the people who are celebrating a war criminal, multiple war criminals. So I'm not going to say anything about that subject.
I share your anger, but for different reasons. I went downtown and met up with Tone Vase after some stupid blockchain conference, and he walked away for 10 minutes, and I was accosted and mentally assaulted by some medical records on the blockchain guy. Like, I am seriously peeved with Tone right now. We're going to have some problems in the future.
Oh, man. Like I said, you got to wear a bullshit bulletproof vest to those sort of events because you know they're going to come your way. But, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm feeling a little bit more physically accosted. On a little bit of a break, I got in a little bit of an accident there with the car on a bike, and yeah, I've been kind of putting off a few things I should have done. I'm sorry I'm not in the chat box again. I didn't get a chance to really get my internet upgraded there because I've been under some heavy sedative CBD for the past couple of days.
Health comes first, my dude. You gotta deal with that fucking shit bag, get yourself set up, and delays aren't the end of the world.
Yeah, but I'm fine, man. I mean, like, I think I'm fine. I'm gonna go get double checked up here in the next couple of days, but I think I'm fine.
Alrighty though. Show notes wise, I think we're gonna swap Rick and Janine around today, so Janine can work through a little bit of her anger. But I'm gonna dive right in to the first story. The mining landscape is changing. I think the barriers to entry are growing, and crazy shit is happening. So DPW Holdings, a very big holding company traded on the New York Stock Exchange. They're actually the owners of the subsidiary that launched the Anteater miner a little earlier this year that they kind of collaborated with Samsung to design and manufacture, are bringing online a 1 megawatt hydro dam in New York State that was originally built in 1983 specifically for the purposes of crypto mining. So I think we can say this is the first time, at least that I'm aware of, that a mining operation has literally purchased and set up to operate their own power production facilities for a mining operation. And so this is going to be a 1 megawatt production capacity explicitly set up just for crypto mining. And hopefully by the end of this last quarter of 2018, they're going to get this up and running. And it's pretty much a big collaboration between a lot of different subsidiaries of DPW. So the actual dam itself was brought back online by the Valeti Falls Hydro LLC, with specifically with financing help from Digital Power Lending, another DPW subsidiary. And there's been a lot of cross cooperation between the Lady Falls Hydro engineers, CoolSys Technologies engineers, and it's this. This is literally a giant Wall Street holding company, just covering the entire stack here, like financing the power production and bringing the dam back online, having the engineers for their mining operation collaborate with the engineers of the actual company operating the dam to get things set up, and building out the facility right next to the dam to house the mining equipment. So this is literally like the entire stack, from power generation down to the design and production of the chips and the actual construction of the hosting facilities themselves, are all being handled effectively by one entity through DPW Holdings. And it's a chat's already going 1 megawatt, not that big of a deal. I think it is, because this is really setting a precedent here. Like we've seen in New York State previously, some kind of friction with a lot of miners coming into the area and raising rates. We can see the most extreme example in China, where they're literally trying to push miners out of the country. The situation in Quebec with Hydro-Quebec kind of looking at different rates for data centers and mining operations. And there's even, been a decent amount of community kickback in some Nordic countries, like against noise complaints and just like what is the value add of having these kinds of operations consume, our electricity? What does this bring back to the economy? And so for the first time, we've just seen a company pretty much go, fuck it. Like, just buy and operate our own power production facilities. You don't have to deal with any of this shit then. You own the power. You can send or use the power however you want. It's like, just remove the political nonsense that large mining operations have to deal with. Like, it's all your property. You can do whatever the hell you want with it. And I really think like this is going to be like how things go, like moving forward from here for much larger operations. And I mean, like we recently covered a firm in New York that wants to start building wind farms in West Africa to power cryptocurrency mining. Like it's the electricity is the biggest cost. It's the biggest political headache in terms of a mining operation. So fuck it, do it yourself. Remove all of these complications and you are in complete control of your operation. And given that, it's obviously not right now, but in the long term, I fully expect liquidity, at least in nominal Bitcoin terms, on marketplaces to just keep shrinking. Like we're eventually going to hit a point where liquidity starts drying up. Big holders are not going to want to liquidate their holdings. And mining is a way that large players are going to be able to look at with some kind of predictability as far as putting large amounts of capital into crypto. And like this kind of blueprint for how to do that is going to be part of the picture they're going to have to look at. Otherwise, they're adding more uncertainty, like more variables that they have to continually ask questions about and stay on top of, that makes like their return on that less predictable. And I mean, like this, like it's not a lot of power, but I think this is really going to set a precedent that a lot of large players are going to start considering.
Yeah, man. And I mean, it's really kind of a mixed bag of feelings whenever you see these large things come together like this. And it kind of puts a layer in my mind that there's going to be a little bit more discussion on the ends of what they want to talk about in development. Whenever they have like a control of, a large economic node in mining, and they play their part as far as the BIP process and trying to actually influence development. But like also we kind of suspected like the long game of all this, if you want to get Bitcoin in the future, whenever, quote unquote happens, I mean, at that point, it's like you really do need to be somewhere involved in mining, because it's going to be very hard to actually accumulate Bitcoin at that point. So I can understand like the long-term view of this, and like he's trying to get in the space and make their earnings within it. But at the same time, it does throw that little bit of paranoia in my mind that this is a little too much under one entity, and especially with they got connections back to Wall Street and the banks, and how that all is going to play out, I don't know. But I mean, at least they're doing it through a hydroelectric plant, and I guess add to the Bitcoin hash rate and all that. That's great, but it does kind of leave me wondering like what's going to happen in the future with that hash rate when developments come up and down the line. So yeah, it's a mixed bag of feelings, especially with the whole the New York not too long ago. I remember that had to do with some miners coming into town and setting up shop. Makes me wonder, like, did they sort of put that moratorium in place because these sort of deals were already sort of working their way in the back? And we've seen this in Montana. They've got a coal plant with tied to miners there, and the politicians are already wrapped up in that. And in Texas, they're trying to turn that coal plant into a mining operation. A lot of this politics and bigger companies getting wrapped up in this game to where it's more players coming in the space, but it's people from a position where we don't exactly know what their incentives are.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, this is an unavoidable direction of things. And I mean, this is one of the reasons it is so fucking important to keep nodes like affordable to actually run. Like this is why people like me are so hardline about that, because ultimately, I mean, unless you're willing to go the route Cobra or like Luke advocate and constantly play games and risk setting the entire house on fire, cycling through proof of work changes, it's unavoidable that the mining landscape is going to become corporatized and really dominated by big players. I mean, in the long term, like when hardware is commoditized, like you'll probably be able to, if you crunch your numbers and you know what you're doing, run very small, like home scale operations, hit your return on investment or some kind of gain that you see worth it. But ultimately, like, we're not going to escape scales of economy where the large players are the ones really dominating the space and making up a large amount of the hash rate. And I mean, it really comes down to like when you start talking about things like decentralization, you have to look at relative distribution. And I mean, I don't see it as any kind of long-term killer for Bitcoin to have like this space or this aspect of the space become heavily corporatized or dominated by big players, as long as relative to each other, they're relatively distributed and you don't have like a huge single dominant monopoly or player like people have been looking at Bitmain as like for the past couple of years. Like you just need that balance where no one player can really dominate or steer the entire game.
Yeah, 1 megawatt, like you chat was saying. I mean, it's not that much hash rate right now. So I mean, maybe we should be looking at the amount of power that they're getting in these contracts, and really only worry like a large amount of power get pushed over towards one operation.
But it's like, ultimately this is going to set a precedent in the long term. Like, you have to start thinking about where your power is coming from. I mean, just like everywhere you look, there's huge migrations of miners. There's political and economic issues cropping up with the cost of power. Like you can't really have that be a complete certainty unless you have some hand in the production of that power.
Yeah, man, I think from now on, whenever we see mining operations set up, there's always going to be a power or some power station that's being taken over with that farm, just because it seems to be like you kind of need to get access to the power, and you're going to be sure of that before you really get headlong.
I'm gonna shoot along into the next one, also kind of mining related. So we've got some news from Bitmain, desperately trying to maintain some kind of relevance with the S9 Hydro. And so before I get into this absurd sales pitch from Bitcoin.com, point blank, this is so obviously them just overclocking their existing backlog of hardware and tossing water cooling systems on it to overclock them without destroying them and try to unload some of this huge backlog of obsolete hardware they have sitting in the warehouses. So like they pretty much set these up and overclock them to around 18 terahashes. So they're squeezing about an extra 4 terahashes per unit out of it. And they're really going with just a huge, like, I mean, like this whole article, like on Bitcoin.com is just like the most absurd sale pitch in the world. Like it's a little bit less of a power consumption just because, you know, you can set things up with a water cooling system. You're not constantly burning electricity, you know, running a fan. So you can squeeze a little bit out of the chips because this is actually a much more effective cooling system in that it's not just kind of passively pulling heat. It's accurate. It's not just displacing the heat with air movement. You're actually moving something colder through the hardware and kind of facilitating, like bringing in something cold in addition to displacing the heat. So it's really just like, what can we do with this old hardware? Overclock it a little bit, like water cooling so that it doesn't burn itself out, and let's try to fucking shove this shit out as fast as possible. And like the ridiculous thing is, like right now, I think last time I looked, it was like $485 for a vanilla S9 right now. And I think they're going to be charging a little more than $1,000 for this. So you're talking a 4 terahash increase. That's like roughly like a third increase in efficiency for double the price. And like the big thing that they're really trying to sell here is the noise reduction, because that's something that you're going to have to deal with, especially at much larger scales. And then the enclosed nature of it, kind of safeguarding things from dust. So a little bit less of a risk of wear and tear on the hardware. But I mean, like ultimately, like this is them just slapping water cooling on old hardware, overclocking it, and going, look, please don't notice that we haven't like successfully taped out a next generation chip in 2 years. Please buy our shit and get all of this unloadable shit off of our books so we don't wind up sitting with 2 giant bags like the old hardware and Bcash. And I mean, like where's one paragraph stood out in this? Where is it? Yeah, like this Bitcoin.com article is like looking at its 1700 watt draw at the wall, which is less than a typical home tea water heat. No, it's not. Yeah, a typical carafe or whatever, like to boil water for tea or coffee, draws maybe like 1,000, 1,200 watts. So like they're literally outright lying, trying to put like a comparison in people's head. Like it's not going to take as much energy as heating your tea. It's like, this is so obviously just Roger trying to kind of scratch Jihan's back here and help him unload this shit. I mean, wow. Like there is no reason to be buying Bitmain hardware right now except just cutthroat prices, so you can try and hit that return on investment faster, because like these will become unprofitable faster than the next gen equipment that's being pushed out by pretty much all of Bitmain's competitors right now. And I mean, it's like this is like they're just fucked. Like they're flailing around. Investors are pulling out of the pre-IPO round. They got busted red-handed just committing blatant fraud in their pre-IPO slide decks. And now it's just like absolutely anything we can do to get this fucking hardware out of our warehouses without an insane loss. And like it's hilarious. Like they're completely falling behind, and like they're just doing anything they can to get these losses off their books.
Yeah, man, I was kind of laughing at this story too, just because I think it really kind of popped up after the leak happened, right before. I'm not or right after. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, it's like it's the same hardware. It's like if big players are really looking to find hardware, they're going to find the most efficient hardware, and like the noise part, it's I mean, that's something that most of these big players are kind of factoring into this stuff. And I've already seen, videos like a year ago where people were putting S9s in mineral oil, and doing their own. So like, this is just, like a fancy way to try and get some stuff off the shelf to where I guess, get some money back on the books for these guys, because it's obvious, like you're saying, I mean, they are flailing pretty bad, and they're getting, this is, I guess, the death throes, just like, hey, look, we got this thing for sale, buy it. I saw a pretty funny meme where it was like Bitmain selling T-shirts and bumper stickers and any percent off to try and get some money back in their hands. So yeah, it really is kind of just kind of reaffirming this fact that Bitmain is just kind of becoming more and more irrelevant when it comes to mining, and what their whole roadmap goes towards whenever in the Bitcoin ecosystem. I mean, for the most part, I guess they're really just like, they're really out of the game already. Now it's just sort of waited out.
I mean, it's like it literally is just a matter of time. Like it's the second like competitors really start, getting things working the kinks out of the new hardware, really getting their handle of like the production and supply chains. I mean, those prices are going to start coming down. And I mean, when you're talking about a more efficient hardware, like better designed hardware, lower electricity consumption, I mean, that's going to just start squeezing the shit out of them. And like, it's really just, if they can't unload this before that really starts happening, then you're just fucked. Like you're going to be sitting on Bcash bags you can't liquidate. You're going to be sitting on a shit ton of hardware you can't liquidate. I mean, like they're screwed. And it's not, again, like we'll get a little more into this. We've got two more stories that kind of roughly overlap with this, but like a lot of the hardware they're sitting on isn't just S9s. Like they're sitting on, I think it was the V9, which was pretty much just S7 kind of compacted into like a smaller miner. Like it's like they just fucked up. Like they were top dog, had the entire like mining ecosystem locked down, and they just made all the wrong moves, and it's going to bite them in the ass hard.
And you really burning them is that Bcash holdings, man. I mean, like maybe they're trying to sell everything they can to get back somewhat of a Bitcoin position without destroying that coin.
But you want to take us through the SEC stuff, Rick, while Janine meditates away her anger?
Yeah, definitely need that to happen. And this SEC stuff is a little bit of weeds to tumble through. So let's so right when we ended the show on Wednesday, I saw these tweets about how the SEC had shot down 9 total ETF proposals based on the Bitcoin futures markets. And these were filed back in December when the futures launched. And now the SEC finally came to a conclusion on where they stand with these. So the two leading the headline are the ProShares Bitcoin ETF and the ProShares Short Bitcoin ETF. I had heard some back and forth about this proposal being a little more likely to succeed where the others might fail, and the Winklevoss twins kind of might have made an error when it comes to how this stuff is being held and sponsored and distributed. So ProShares tried to split up the fund between the sponsors, trying to get approval. However, it looks like the SEC is just not ready to award this first ETF. So let's go through this document. It's 26 pages really of a bunch of repetition and footnotes and comments, but let's hit this high note here on page 2, halfway down. This is like basically just their response to this ETF proposal for the ProShares. Quote, "This order disapproves rule change. Although the commission is disapproving this proposed rule change, the commission emphasizes that its disapproval does not rest on an evaluation on whether Bitcoin or blockchain technology more generally has utility or value as investment." Yeah, like I don't think that as anybody cares really that the SEC's got to say whether or not Bitcoin is worth something. People know that. All right, so I'm going to continue here. Rather, the commission is disapproving this proposed. As discussed below, the exchange has not met its burden under the Exchange Act and the Commission's rules of practice to demonstrate that its proposal is consistent with the requirements of the Exchange Act, Section 6B5. In particular, the requirements that an exchange rules be designed to prevent fraudulent and manipulative activities and acts and practices. Among other things, the exchanges has offered no recorded evidence to demonstrate that Bitcoin futures markets are sufficient size. That failure is critical because, as explained below, the exchange has failed to establish that other means to prevent fraudulent and manipulative acts and practices will be sufficient, and therefore surveillance sharing with a regulated market of significant size related to Bitcoin is necessary to satisfy the statutory requirements that the exchange rules be designed to prevent fraudulent and manipulative acts and practices. All right. So the main factor in these denials appears to be Bitcoin futures markets are not of, quote, sufficient size and ripe for manipulation, which I don't want to run off on a rant, but it's kind of crazy hearing them say that, making sure the market isn't being manipulated when that is really like all that's going on Wall Street. And so let's get down to I guess the only other really interesting part to this whole series of stuff, because it is a lot of footnotes and repetition to word this, surveillance, surveillance sharing and sufficient size. But there was some interesting comments received by the SEC, which is down there like around page 14. It says on these ETF proposals, the comments, one commenter says it's putting the cart before the horse and an attempt to appease institutional investors, which, I'm kind of starting to fall in line with that. The ETFs are going to give people more access, but it will most likely be institutional investors that are already trading. So, but these, there was some more comments. These three commenters asserted that there is manipulation. It points out the BitConnect and Ponzi schemes in the space, says an ETF would send the wrong signal to Bitcoin manipulators, and the volatility in Bitcoin is not the result of natural trading, and an ETF would limit price discovery. And then one commenter repeats the statistics of wallet holdings and disproportionate amount of Bitcoins in circulation, which we've gone over about exchanges and custodial services and the way that just the 4% that they're calculating. So one commenter goes off on Kraken for not cooperating with the New York Attorney General for some reason. This the commenter, quote, the commenter notes that the Kraken exchange refusal to cooperate with this inquiry and believes that this refusal should pose serious questions for investors and the commission about the Kraken exchange's operations, particularly after it recently exited the Japanese market due to regulatory requirements. So it feels like these comments and a lot of the discussion in this 26-page document is just a lot of feedback that they're getting from, people that are just like in speculative thought as to the way they think this thing should be run. But so as far as the why these ProShares weren't approved, it appears to stem from sufficient size and needed for surveillance sharing, which I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, it sounds like they don't understand the market. I mean, I guess they're waiting to, we're seeing all these exchanges add KY, really to just appease regulators and everything. And they really want this thing to be surveilled, and they want to make sure that the market isn't going to be manipulated and it's going to be of, quote, sufficient size. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about this whole like them just shutting down the ETF because of these reasons? Like, and how do you feel about the Bitcoin ETF in general? Because I know there's been a lot of mixed opinions on that too now.
I think the whole logic is absolutely fucking absurd. I mean, we're literally talking about the SEC making these claims regarding market manipulation in a stock market rally that is literally fueled by corporations just getting cheap lines of credit and buying back their own stocks. Like the stock market is rallying up because the corporations themselves on the S&P 500 are buying their own stocks. And they want to talk about market manipulation. Let alone what the fuck does market manipulation even mean? What is natural trading? Like it's what people will do when you step back and let them actually trade their own money. Hester Pierce, the commissioner, hit the nail on the head here. It's like it's not the fucking SEC's job to sit here and decide what people are and are not allowed to do, are and are not allowed to invest in. Like you're just playing gatekeeper. Like this is absurd. And like the shit with Kraken, like, I mean, you just look at these markets. Like people trade, people buy, people sell. The reasons they choose to do that is none of their damn business. And like all they're doing is just screaming manipulation. Well, what the hell do you think they're trying to do? Like just look at the commodities markets with things like gold and the way you have shit tons of just paper gold printed out of nowhere and naked shorting used to suppress the markets. Like this is how traditional markets work. It's the most hypocritical thing in the fucking world to sit here and scream we're not going to fucking approve an ETF because of market manipulation. What do you think makes the legacy markets go around? And, at the end of the day, as to whether an ETF should exist or not, like, it's nobody's business to say they shouldn't. Like, people can interact with Bitcoin however they choose to interact with. And really, the only thing I want to see before an ETF is approved is the current proposed rule change to be approved so that an ETF could just launch as long as it wasn't exposing itself to futures products and is specifically dealing with Bitcoin itself. And I mean, as long as that rule change is there, like go have at it. Like launch as many ETFs as you want. Like my only problem is the SEC continuing to play gatekeeper and deciding who can and can't launch an ETF. Because like that's inevitably going to lead to them being in control of how concentrated large amounts of Bitcoin wind up being in the ETF space. Because they're in a position there to just say, no, you're well plugged and connected. Yes. Okay. Go amass a huge amount of fucking Bitcoin and have a disproportionate say in the changes or upgrades to consensus rules. And I mean, as long as anybody can just launch one that isn't exposed to futures, like, I don't care. Like that will work itself out. That will distribute things around, and you won't have the SEC picking a handful of people to wind up with a shit ton of Bitcoins and have a disproportionate influence on future forks or upgrades. I mean, but like aside from that, like who is anybody to tell somebody else how they should or should not interact with Bitcoin? That's literally the whole point of this, is you can use it however you want.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole Kraken comment really kind of aggravated me because I'm just like thinking like, yeah, these guys are trying to be competitive in a global market in this currency, in Bitcoin. And it's like they just don't understand that like bending or attorney general is not good for their business. And I mean, that's where it's like, they're trying to serve their business. And yeah, it just really aggravates me that there's like a real misunderstanding there. And also, yeah, like you're saying, the whole isolation, I think we've lived in a world of market manipulation to an extent of, just such a level that it's really like lost its meaning and people don't even quite understand what it is. And the sufficient size is really like the great gatekeeper like, oh, well, it's great, but it's not sufficient size. We decide the sufficient size. So, I mean, it's definitely something where I feel like they are playing the gatekeepers and all that. But, the next thing, because, this is like falls right into it. I mean, this story developed over this past week because you think over this discussion and the time and speculation over this past since December that, these Bitcoin futures ETPs are not going to happen. That's what it sounds after this story, right? No. The SEC announced Thursday that the 9 ETFs just rejected are to be stayed until further reviewing Rule 431 of the Commissioner's Rules of Practice. The SEC said in a series of letters that it would reconsider the 3 rejections made by the U.S. regulator staff. According to the Rules of Practice, the Commission may effectively, quote, affirm, reverse, modify, set aside, or remand for further proceedings in whole or in part, end quote, which technically means the end of this batch of Bitcoin ETFs is not final, with further specific body responsible for gathering the additional information and ultimately setting the record straight is now the 3 SEC commissioners and the chairman, Jay Clayton. Something like this similarly happened with the Winklevoss Bitcoin ETF, where its rejection was upheld, citing the same reasons for rejection. However, these back and forth practices got one commissioner to speak up, like you were saying. Hester Pierce always hit the nail on the head there. She wrote that letter of dissent, disagreeing with the outcome, and also stating that the SEC should be focused on disclosure rather than playing gatekeeper to the market. This discussion will likely be raised again during this current Bitcoin ETF proposals. So Jake Chavinsky, a defense and litigation lawyer for Cobra and Kim LLP, told CoinDesk, quote, given the nature of yesterday's decision and the fact that the commissioners so recently handled the Winklevoss appeal, I don't think it will take long to finish this review. However, the rules of practice do not set a strict, it's hard to predict. So don't hold your breath, people, because you'll die waiting for the SEC to do something. I mean, this is it's a ridiculous back and forth where in the SEC ranks, I'm sure like this article speculates from CoinDesk that, it's probably just someone on the commission that disagrees with it and they can set forth this stay. And now it's still up in as much as like we ended the show last week and it felt like, okay, these ETFs got denied. Well, here it is a week later. It turns out that they weren't. The market really didn't have much reaction because, like they want to, the S Bitcoin, they're not going to make a statement on whether or not it's got intrinsic value. Like we don't care about that. Like we understand this. And like you guys are the one that are just holding your feet down. So yeah, it's a ridiculous story. And I mean, like, I'm surprised if we do hear some of these things get approved, but maybe like a year from now or something like that, it'll come out of the blue and we'll probably see something get approved before these, or, like the back thing is definitely something to look. It's just a different instrument that's not an ETF. I feel like these different instruments are getting set up from institutional investors, before they really let in everybody. Similar to like we were saying with the mining store, lock that stuff down. I wouldn't be surprised if like while we're in this little bit of a bear trend and maybe people want to call it a bear market, I don't know, but I mean, like while the price is down, I mean, I think a lot of people are just sort of setting themselves in the first through the gate.
I mean, it's like they're just like they have a stated mandate and they're so far overstepping it with just the most hypocritical rationale for it. I mean, and like to circle back a little bit to like the comments about Kraken and their response to the state's attorney general. Like, no, like I applaud them for that. Like we're literally talking about a world right now that we just had like almost a vast majority of U.S. citizens had all of their private information leaked with the Equifax hacks. What happened, like, I think a year or so prior to that, the fucking United States government was hacked, likely by China, and a vast majority of federal employees had their private information leaked. Like you want all of these companies to turn over like a shit ton of people's private information to a class of people that have shown just a complete inability to actually secure that. You want to make it easier for people to be hacked and defrauded? Like, no, go fuck yourself. Like it's just completely absurd reasoning from top to bottom. Like you want to cry market manipulation? Go look at the stock market. Go look at the ETF markets for things like gold and other commodities. Like it's absurd. Like manipulation is anything they don't want to see happen. Well, guess what? The whole point of a market is to let people sort shit out themselves, not have the government say what should and shouldn't happen.
Yeah, man, it's that is really one of those things where I was reading that 26 pages and I'm trying to figure out last night, like what part to clip, that one really did hit me. And it's just like, man, this really does show like, it's just like a total misunderstanding. I think it is a misunderstanding. Like people don't understand still like what, I mean, running the meetup and stuff, I don't understand. And I mean, I think it's the same with these guys. They don't understand. They live by the old rules and they still like the old rules. They play by those rules and they expect Bitcoin to yield and play by those rules too. I think, like we were saying a while back when we talk about the SEC kind of holding up development and, people worried about whether or not they're dealing with something that's legal or not is something that's really holding the country back. And like you're saying, I mean, and, I'm not going to say like, everything good's got to come out of the U.S. I mean, like, it's a good thing that these companies are doing their part to try and, maintain security in this world where, it is very hard to be secure. So, yeah, I really give those guys credit for doing what they did too. And this isn't the end of the stories for these ETFs. I mean, we got September 7th, the Bitwise one coming up, and on September 30th, the VanEck and SolidX as well coming up. So I think these stories, they're going to keep popping up until we finally see like how exactly this institutional market is going to be dealing with Bitcoin, because I think we might just see like dealing with the futures and backed than these ETFs. I don't know if they're ever going to go through. I mean, like you're saying, I mean, hopefully they'll have this, a pre-approved sort of parameters to get this thing through, because otherwise I just don't see it happening. There's just too many people in there from institutional and traditional markets that are going to try and hold things up and make sure that they're in the right place, and they're going to miss the boat. I mean, like, this isn't a boat where it's just your guys get in. This is a global, people are moving quicker than we are because they haven't had to play by those rules. They've had to find their way around those. And, they see this as being a much more efficient way of doing that. And they're going to lead the way if the SEC and these guys don't really step out of the way. I mean, it's hopefully we'll start to see more and more people like stop paying attention to what the SEC is even saying. I mean, we'll just start to see these things get approved, be, investing in Bitcoin how they like.
All right, Janine, are you ready to vent your anger now that I freshly triggered you in private?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't even see that message because I was too busy finishing writing. But yeah, so if you want to, I don't think I actually included in the show notes, but if you want to bring up the decentralized website, I think it's decentralized.com. That's the conference website. So I received an email about this conference, which is taking place in Athens in November this year. And a woman by the name of Susanne Tarkowski Tempelhof was listed as a speaker. And you may have heard of Tempelhof back in 2014 as the founder of BitNation, otherwise known as the not really functional nation state on the Ethereum blockchain. Susanna has a lot of prior experience with dysfunctional nation states, though, because before entering the Bitcoin space and the Ethereum space, she worked for a real one. And I'm going to read a biography that is provided within her speaker profile on the website. says, Tarkowski Tempelhof is an award-winning entrepreneur, a crypto activist and writer living and working in international frontier environments. In the 2000s, she built and sold multi-million-dollar contracting businesses in Afghanistan and Libya. Her companies conducted pioneering research on governance for the United States State Department and the Department of Defense. Let me repeat that again. Pioneering research on governance for the U.S. State Department. While it is certainly true, she was a defense contractor for the U.S. State Department and Department of Defense for several years, I would hardly call the work that she did pioneering research on governance. What she actually did is spend, quote, nearly 7 years working as a contractor in various conflict zones from Afghanistan to Pakistan to Egypt and Libya, assisting with the building and overthrowing of governments. Yes. She even made an appearance in the Stratfor emails released by WikiLeaks as part of the Global Intelligence Files in February 2012. On July 1st, 2011, only a half year prior to the public leak of the emails, she sent an offer to service@stratfor.com. Dear Sir, Madam, my firm is currently headquartered in Libya, Benghazi, and focused on research, data collection, and key leader engagement activities. We have a field network of about 50 screened local Libyan personnel throughout the East, as well as leading international analysts and subject matter experts on Libya. We're currently conducting research for a number of organizations, including Caris, I think it's pronounced, Associates, / Dr. David Kilcullen, United States Institute of Peace. I would be interested to speak with you to explore if there's a venue for my team on the ground to plug into the collection work you do. Feel free to contact me, and she provides her email and Skype account. If you're interested in that, you can, I mean, she would be stupid to still use it, but if you want to find that, it's in the WikiLeaks files if you want to try and contact her over Skype. As a side note, for anyone who is not familiar with Caris Associates, they are also a Pentagon and State Department contractor. And I haven't checked what year she left, but in 2015, the CEO of Caris Associates was a woman named Erin Simpson, who was one of the analysts in General Stanley McChrystal's counterinsurgency advisory assistance team in Afghanistan, which was started under the Obama administration. McChrystal, in case you aren't familiar with that name, he's the one that was famous for the "when we understand this slide, we'll have won the war," which was a NATO strategy chart that was just a mess of lines and circles and jobs to get done that, never worked. Simpson was being paid about $100,000 a year by another U.S. government contractor called Skitter, which is or was being paid millions of dollars for, quote, militarized spying and surveillance work, especially in Afghanistan and, quote, other wars around the globe. You can read more about that in an article from, I think, 2015 titled "A Major Defense Contractor Buys Its Way Back into the Spying Business" from The Nation. In summary, pulled from a description of a TED Talk that she gave years ago, she, quote, sold a strategic communications company carrying out campaigns for the U.S. military in war-ravaged Afghanistan, and then a second one in Libya and Egypt during the Arab Spring. During her work, she was exposed to the challenges of assisting in building and overthrowing governments and the international systems and dynamics. So yes, it is part of her resume that she participated in overthrowing governments. In a 2015 interview, she said the following: "Hence, I went through a brief period of great self-doubt where I thought what I had done for most of my 20s was pretty much either not very significant in terms of impact or even at times straight out harmful. While Zuckerberg, through a computer in a dorm, had done more of a positive impact than I could ever have dreamt of." Not exactly a great role model, but you get the point.
Wow.
I decided to make this my segment a few days ago. I did not expect that I would be covering it on the same day that a more prominent war criminal would be pronounced dead. I found a statement from him where in the last year he has finally admitted that the war in Iraq was a mistake. No shit. Some people might think that that admission is some kind of profound atonement from a man wizened by his deathbed. Maybe that's the case. But I am personally tired of people like him, members of this elite class, which Susanne became a part of, getting a pass on their decades of warmongering that killed millions of people, fundamentally damaged an entire region for generations, and also obviously affected domestic policy in that regard. He is beyond lucky, this person who I will not give even the benefit of naming. He is beyond lucky that he got to die peacefully, surrounded by his family, something that he and others denied to their victims, who will never get eulogies about their own lives we will never learn about, because the chances are that their friends and family were extinguished with them in an instant, which was a consequence of the surveillance and targeting technology that these contractors like Susanne built and used as part of their so-called pioneering research on governance. Tempelhof claims that she went through these bouts of depression after realizing her lack of impact. But I'm going to appeal to her narcissism and say, you did have impact, Susanne. You participated in genocide, whether you realized it at the time or not. And you have still never formally apologized for that. In June, I pointed out that she was a speaker and tweeted about why her decentralized 2018 biography was not only, as you saw, very euphemistic about her past, but frankly insulting to the ideals that I hope people in Bitcoin and the wider cypherpunk movement hold dear. And 2 days ago, I updated that thread to note the fact that she was made a keynote speaker and tagged the other keynote speakers in that tweet to see if they would acknowledge this fact and ask them what they thought about sharing a stage with someone like her. And I have not received a single response to that, either in public or in private. And that almost angers me more than her having a platform at all. And so I would ask anyone who is planning to attend this conference or has contact with any of the organizers or speakers to bring this issue to their attention and not give people like her a platform so that we have to wait for them to die for them to realize the harm they've caused.
Yeah, that's honestly like the idea of some award-winning, like this is where it's like I just like don't understand where these experts come from and like these titles and like these like they just fluff this story to the point of like, man, this person was participatory in a really horrendous way to just tear down a local government and give like the ultimate power of surveillance to the people that are in charge. And basically just, I mean, like Libya is like if that is a award-winning decentralized dumpster fire, I mean, I don't know what that's a terrible thing to have on your resume. And I think that, people should pick apart these, some of these people, coming in with like just like a bunch of titles and stuff behind them that say that they've done this, that, and the other, where, I mean, if you look at the history, the real recent history, I mean, there's terrible ththings going on in those countries. So, I mean, like, how is this something to stand on in both? I'm not really sure. And, as, with the other guy that recently passed yesterday, I mean, it's like you're saying, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like people get these Nobel Peace Prizes and they're like, and they're just like all these ironies of like, this person, he was like a prisoner of war and like, and now, and then became a senator. And then like the irony of like him just like, having this, just stroking the pen and people dying all over the world. And it's something where there's a lot of irony involved here, but I hope, maybe you can, take some deep breaths on this, because maybe, these people will stand up paying attention to what's going on there. Hopefully, some people, they'll get some feedback from your report here. And it's just, it's something to do with the whole conferences in the United States, where I think they have to like appease some of these people that are trying to make their way and inroads in this space. And they just like give them this platform to stand on. And the other guys are kind of left sort of like, I don't know what to do, because it's like, they asked me and then this person showed up. And I mean, like I see it a lot here. I wish the conferences around here were more like the Baltic conferences, but in a bubble around here and people not understanding what we're doing.
Yeah, and I would just like to point out, because some people are kind of under the spell of her her appearance, and I would like to point out that you are not alone, and there are people in the U.S. government and the UK government who, let's say, personally lavish in that fact to this day.
Okay, all right. Breathing deep, stifling my inner troll, inner pig. Okay. There is a serious problem with women like Susanne and just people in general who kind of involve themselves in this aspect of government contracting. and then kind of just walk away unscathed, like Janine said. And to speak specifically to Susanne and women in these kinds of roles, like, this is not something that just happens accidentally. Like, when you're dealing with intelligence communities, when you're dealing with people who are very practiced and skilled in the art of propaganda, they will specifically choose women simply because of how attractive they are and how distracting that can be for half of the population, to just draw your attention away from their actual character and their acts. And I mean, to go on a little quick aside, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with John Perkins, who was actually involved in this kind of shit pretty much through the 70s all the way up to the 90s. And I think the firm he worked for was Maine something, but he was specifically positioned through backdoor channels at an economic consulting firm that did a lot of pretty much outsourced work for organizations like the NSA. And his job was pretty much to go to foreign countries that were setting up for loan packages from organizations such as the IMF or the United Nations, and look at projections for the profitability of taking out loans for infrastructure improvement, electrical grids, transportation infrastructure, and so on, and fudge the figures to create an assessment of profitability or return on that loan that was just absolutely not in line with reality. And pretty much the course he took to wind up in this job was his father-in-law actually worked at the NSA. And instead of simply being hired and given a job, he was kind of steered into the Peace Corps, where he developed a number of connections with people. And then after coming back from that, through back channels, given this job working at this economic consulting firm, in a way that his direct employers were not even aware what he was doing there, or that he had any of these ties with the intelligence community. And when he was first recruited, they specifically did a deep background check on him, to the point of like finding the characteristics he saw as most attractive in women. And the handler who approached him and actually kind of first inducted him into this world was a woman who was specifically chosen to hit all the check marks of what he found most attractive in a woman. And they will very intentionally play these kinds of very subtly manipulative psychological tactics to steer people's attention, to twist people's arms into doing something that they otherwise wouldn't do. And this is pretty much just par for the course as far as the back channel games that intelligence communities play. End rant.
Yeah, it's always, I don't know, it's just one of those things where that whole thing is just so, I don't know, it's just awful, really. It's like a real irony, just like we were saying about, that guy and his prisoner of war, and now he's stroking a pen. The same thing goes with just this person being held as somebody that we should pay attention to understand the way that decentralized governance, because it just feels like if you look at that history, I mean, it's like, there was some work done there, but then the governance models absolutely failed.
Yeah, I'm also going to make a statement about the use of women in war, and I'm going to specifically talk to obviously American women, because this is mostly an American-driven conflict. Women, you are under the impression that because you were born with the privilege of being female, and yes, I will say you have a privilege being born female, that when the ruling class of your country decides to go to war, that you will not be forced to sacrifice your body to violence and cruelty, whether at your own hands or at the often equally coerced foreign soldier you call the enemy, that you are not subject to conscription, that you have been excluded from that, but you are conscripted. You are the propaganda pushers, or you're the propaganda fodder for these wars. And you need to realize that your participation in that fuels this equally to the people who are forced to hold guns.
Yeah, it's, pretty attractive woman, and, I can steer a lot of people. So watch out.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like it is another hard lesson that there are reasons that you should think with your big brain that go far beyond just direct effects on your personal life.
Yeah, it's always a fight, and that's where I guess these intelligence agencies know that they can bend you.
All right, though. We're going to jump into the next topic. Awesome news I saw just before we went live. Vladimir has just merged the first compact block filter pull request into Bitcoin Core. So this is a awesome step towards a new mode of dealing with SPV wallets. And for those aren't really clear what this is pretty much the neutrino filter that Lalu from Lightning Labs came up with, and that Nopara is actually integrated into the Wasabi wallet. And pretty much what this allows is a node to construct filters corresponding to each block that it's validated. And then instead of the traditional SPV mode, where you would effectively just query with a Bloom filter for your addresses and then get back Merkle proofs for things, this would allow you to kind of download an index of these filters, which would, I think, be around a gigabyte or so. So it might be for a smartphone a little painful in the initial bootstrapping phase. But after that, it would be pretty light in terms of resources to catch up to, and is something that storage on most mobile phones today could handle right now. But from that point on, instead of the traditional way of querying Bloom filters with horrible privacy, or something like Electrum server, where you're literally just giving a central server your addresses, you could use these filters to figure out which blocks likely have transactions that are relevant to your wallet, and simply download those specific blocks in order to figure out any changes in your address balances. And so this is a much more private way to kind of handle SPV or light clients without really destroying your privacy by, giving a specific actor on the network enough information to tie your addresses to an IP address or something that could be used to then further move forward and try to actually tie your identity to, specific coins in the network. And so this right now is pretty much just the actual data structure for the filters themselves. So there's still going to be some work needed. And the next step would be to actually construct an index mechanism for nodes to actually build an index for these, similar to the transaction index, which is a requirement for, say, running an Electrum server or a block explorer, or anything that's parsing the data by actual transaction. And so, there's still some work. Obviously, this isn't going to make it into 0.017 because that's already hit feature freeze. But hopefully, if there's a lot of work and some people jump behind this, maybe we can see this in 0.18. But this would be an awesome step forward. SPV wallets could actually start working on integrating things. And I'm hoping, given their track record for privacy, Samurai will be one of the wallets out there kind of leading the curve on this. But right now, I'm pretty sure the only thing supporting this is actually a BTCD fork ran by Roast Beef. So seeing this get into Bitcoin Core proper and kind of give SPV wallets a little bit of a more incentive with a wider access to the filters would actually help this be adopted a little faster, because Bloom filters are nowhere near as private as they were thought to be when they were first developed. And things like the Electrum or Mycelium method used right now, where you're pretty much just giving all of your addresses to a single node or server, is horrible for user privacy. And this would be a huge jump forward in terms of network level privacy and actually preventing people from getting their coins tied to their identity.
Man, that's awesome. Like just to see these developments coming down the line that always, you know, are just improving on privacy. That's awesome. I mean, like in stark contrary about, you know, people's privacy getting wrecked and everything, all the bad outcomes of that. It's great to see that, you know, despite there still being a push to, you know, KYC all the exchanges and trying grab everybody in before these sort of developments come down the line. Like really, it's, you know, they're trying to fight this thing, but it's like when you start to see the real developments happening in Bitcoin and the way that these things are becoming more efficient in the way that they can obfuscate their person's identity. It's just, yeah, it's awesome to see. I mean, like that last story, it was terrible news, and it's something that, you know, it's upsetting to see that it's like in the space, but at the same things like this are going on, and it's great to see this kind of work getting done because yeah, it's like privacy is super important.
And I mean, it's like, it's just ultimately like these are the kind of fringe things that are important. Like, you know, all the work recently going into coin joins, things like these neutrino filters and dandelion for the actual network propagation of transactions. I mean, like these will all just kind of coalesce together and build into an actual substantial increase in privacy instead of people just obsessing over things like confidential transactions and just assuming privacy doesn't exist until we get something like that. Like, this is slow, steady progress and iteration, and you will see material benefits from that.
And it's really great for the whole nuance of everything too, because it doesn't give you just a one size fits all. As the developments come out, you kind of keep learning about them, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, you could do CoinJoin, or you could do a, you know, Dandelion protocol, or you could do this and that. It just like, it adds so many more list of features as far as ways to do that, and then just like, yeah, some like, yeah, CT will do it, and that's it. It's like, well, we, you know, there's like a scale on all this stuff, so it's going to be amazing to see like once some of these developments are really been developed like a couple of years down the line, and see like exactly which ones people are using for which use cases.
All right. Who is ready for the latest update from the demented mind of Cobra?
Still around, man? What is going on there?
So, Cobra is either a master troll or he has lost his fucking mind. He has announced, I think 2 days ago now, the Cobra client for the Bcash network. And
Oh, it's named G.I. Joe or something.
but he's either sitting on a lot of bags that he doesn't want getting completely obliterated, or is just a master troll. But his rationale on face is pretty much, you know, Amory is dug in, Calvin Iyer and Craig Wright have dug in. This is obviously just barreling towards the network splitting in two. And this is a bad thing, guys. This is not good for businesses. This is not good for price and network effect or building trust. So he is releasing Cobra client. And effectively what he's going to do is introduce replay protection. He didn't go into what exact mechanism he's going to use for this, so that people can dump their Bcash ABC and their Bcash N-chain without worrying about their Bcash getting messed with. And so these pretty tall claims, which really kind of make me think back to a lot of the claims about Bcash being attacked, 2x, all of the BitPico nonsense. But he claims that he has a commitment from around 25% of the existing Bcash hash rate. A number of major businesses that are testing the software to make sure things check out. He claims that there is one exchange who will trade this under the BCH ticker symbol if the hard fork is successful, and that he's already got the replay protection implemented and ready to roll out for some SPV wallets. And so I honestly, yeah, I don't know whether he's just trolling the shit out of them or literally just trying to protect his Bcash bags. But the end of this is really funny. The last paragraph is users of Cobra client should be wary of competing chains claiming to somehow be the real Bitcoin Cash. Oh wait, you mean like Classic? Even as they push dangerous changes that don't have consensus within the Bcash community. When there can be no consensus, the best option is to make no change at all, which is exactly what Cobra Client does in a safe and responsible way. Cobra Client is currently undergoing testing and pending release within a few weeks.
Man, I want to say it's the latter. He's lost his mind, but I think like he is becoming a pretty master troll, because I know that, you know, just in like the whole Bitmain Popcorn, I've been seeing like, Craig should implement transaction replay protection, and you know, like there's this discussion there in that Bcash side where it's just like, you know, he's trying to, I guess, play the guy in the middle right now and just testing sentiment. It's like, I mean, I don't know how big the Bcash community really is, but I mean, like the sentiment, I imagine he's just sort of testing if he could feel out some of Craig Wright's lackeys without them getting completely pushed off if they agree with Cobra's client. I don't know, man. It is such a ridiculous battle of egos to try and parse out that, yeah, it's probably.
I mean, just, it's like, Cobra, dude, you fucking lost it. You are suffering from serious cognitive dissonance. You never should have bought those bags. Okay, I know that they're heavy. They're probably hurting your back. But just free yourself, man.
Yes.
Did you guys already point out that I don't know if it was Jihan Wu or Cobra, but one of them unfollowed each other, I think.
Yeah, Jihan unfollowed Cobra. A little sneak peek from the popcorn segment. It was right after. No, okay, not right after, but like 2 days after, probably when he first noticed the announcement.
Was it Jihan unfollowed Craig or Craig unfollowed Jihan?
No, Jihan unfollowed Cobra after he saw the Cobra client announcement.
Wow. Yeah, it's a soap opera over there.
Yep. All right, a little interlude before the popcorn segment, though. So ShenMa is actually a small competitor, headed up by a former engineer of Bitmain, the guy who designed the S9. Just released some test results, and it's been running stable at around 33 terahash, drawing around 2190 watts at the wall. And so, yeah, depending on how quickly this can market and really how they can handle the manufacturing and distribution side of things, this is a 16 nanometer chip. And that's pretty much running on par with a 7 nanometer chip. So it's this one particularly is just a punch in the dick to Jihan. Like one of his former engineers, like the guy who literally designed their flagship product, walked off and designed something that is just light years ahead of what Bitmain has available right now. And you know, whatever led to him leaving, whether the work environment or what the company in general was doing, I'm sure that Jihan's blood is boiling at this right now.
Gosh, it's just, yeah, it's funny to think about all the little troubles and stuff that's situation is going down over there at the Bitmain offices, because yeah, it certainly is a stark contrast from just like about a month ago.
I mean, just to like put this in perspective, I mean, like this, if I'm remembering the stats correctly, is on par with the B3 from GMO, and they're running 7 nanometer fabs right now. Like this is just what the former head engineer of Bitmain was able to crank out of 16 nanometer chips. So like from both sides of that, imagine where things are going to go when GMO really like refines what they're doing right now, and imagine what Yangzhou is going to be able to pull off, when they actually kind of move into the 7 nanometer chipset and really start refining that. Like Bitmain, like they're literally just we're slapping water cooling on a 2-year-old product. Please keep giving us your money. While like even the smallest competitor out there is just running light years ahead of them in terms of hardware efficiency.
I mean, you could say that the entire Bcash community is basically a bunch of people or a bunch of frogs getting boiled because, it takes them a while to realize that their entire community is founded on a lack of ability to resolve disputes and no developer support. And when they eventually realize that, it's like, yeah, your skin is falling off and you're all going mad.
Yeah.
All right, so slide into the popcorn section. Stories really kind of tied in nice to each other. Obviously, we just saw Jihan unfollowed Cobra. This is the Hypo Yang. I'm probably butchering the shit out of that name. The CEO of Via BTC and CoinEx is trying to get Craig Wright to implement replay protection for the Satoshi Vision clients, and obviously Craig is just going to double down on stupid. It is very simple. There is one BCH chain, and the one with less hash, yours, parentheses, is sent into non-existence. This is how Bitcoin works. Time to read the white paper again. There is no split when we hard fork and split into different chains, and neither of them will reorg and disappear just because one has more hash rate.
I mean, that's honestly some very sophisticated language for Craig right now that we know that he can't even code hello world on his own. I think we should show that. Anybody want to see that? I want to see that again. You had to copy paste it.
That's not in the list of links. We should show that for sure.
I posted in the internal chat. Internal chat. I mean, he might have deleted it, so it's a screenshot, but who knows? Someone probably archived it.
Yeah, so here's Craig Wright bragging about how he taught C++ Microassembly. And what's that? Oh, declaration. Oh shit! What, he just copy and pasted that from a Hello World example, except added a typo. Ooh. Well, I guess he could have taught. He might have just copy and pasted from his lesson examples.
I mean, see, the deliberately introducing a typo is just genius because, as a serial copy paster, he would know that other people might copy and paste his example and search it on Google or something to find out if it came from anyone else first. So he's like, I will solve this problem by introducing a typo so that nothing will come up in the search results. It's like, great job, Craig. Nice try.
Oh, man. And then BTC King, the conduit of our much-loved Bitmain leaker, laughing about the S9 Hydra.
Oh, man. Yeah, that is a joke.
All right, though, the substantial part of this popcorn segment. So Excellion posted this breakdown by Alan Guo from 2048 Capital, and translated this with his permission. And it's pretty much an in-depth history of Bitmain and just how badly they have fucked everything up. So just a little bit of background. Alan actually has some specialization in terms of hardware chip design. So this is kind of, it's not something he's done a lot recently, but it is something he has a bit of expertise in. And kind of the first thing he points out here is really in this industry, it comes down to energy efficiency. Like that's all that matters in terms of Bitcoin or mining hardware. And if you're not constantly increasing that efficiency, then you're pretty much fucked. And he's kind of just looked right now, like at least in recent history, the jump has pretty much been from 28 nanometers to 16 to 10, and now pretty much the cutting edge of the market right now is moving into 7 nanometers. And pretty much right now, like there's obviously going to be more and more complications in terms of actually physically building something the further down you go. But it's pretty much agreed right now that 0.5 nanometer is as far as you can physically take it under the theoretical physics kind of governing when things start breaking down and you're losing electron coherence due to quantum effects involved in it. But TSMC has pretty much just jumped to 7, and they're planning on moving to 5 nanometer mass production 2019. And then he kind of goes and breaks down the history of different Bitmain chips. And so really in the early days, Fried Cat was Bitmain's biggest competitor. And we can see, like here at the very beginning, Fried Cat had a 130 nanometer chip on the market with around 9,300 watts to terahash, and Bitmain pushed out the S1 and really kind of knocked their socks off, like a 55 nanometer chip, 2,000 watts to the terahash, and pretty much came out of there like just running with a huge efficiency over their competition. And then around the next generation, or well, I guess second chip generation, although not product wise, Fried Cat rolled out a 40 nanometer chip with around 1,100 watts to terahash, and Bitmain was still kind of racing ahead with 28 nanometers and around 770 watts to a terahash. And around then, we kind of started diving into the bear market, although Fried Cat jumped out ahead and kind of caught up with Bitmain in the 28 nanometer and beat them out by around 150 watts per terahash at around 300 to the S5's 448. And so around 2014, their competitors had kind of already outstripped them. Like they had caught up with the nanometer size of the chips and were actually exceeding them in electrical efficiency. And Bitmain was not really doing so well. Like pretty much all they had was a scale of economy, and that was really their edge at that point. But the bear market kind of swooped in and saved them. And, going down to around 1,000 RMB at the very bottom, this pretty much forced Fried Cat out of business. And at that point, it pretty much left Bitmain uncontested. And so they kind of moved into refining the 28 nanometer chipset. And at that time, we're dealing with Avalon as their biggest competitor, both at the 28 nanometer range. And, Bitmain at that time was around 257 watts a terahash. The Avalon A6 was around 300. And so, Avalon's still out there and they're still around, but they pretty much got whomped in terms of market share by Bitmain. Like Bitmain's biggest competitor at the time, actually in terms of, electrical efficiency and chip design, pretty much got smashed to pieces by the bear market. But, this still is like Bitmain really only kind of caught up there by the skin of their teeth. And this is really like with the S7 where they really ballooned and they started seeing massive volume and really kind of captured, the giant market share that they have now. And, from that point on, Avalon caught up was hitting the 16 nanometer fabs. And this is where the current ShenMa head engineer pretty much pushed things down to 16 nanometer and helped design the S9. And at this point, like the difference is obviously enough to lead to Bitmain being the preferred product here, but the Avalon A7 at 16 nanometers was doing 150 watts a terahash, and the S9 at 16 was doing 110. And this is kind of the point where like shit like started going south. Like Bitmain at this point has not actually done anything more efficient than the S9. Like we've seen How Long beat them out at 10 nanometers. We saw eBang hit 10 nanometers. The Anteater by DPW Holdings at 10 nanometers. GMO is pushed into 7 nanometers. Avalon is about to be rolling out 7 nanometer chipsets. Their former engineer literally just took a 16 nanometer chip and put it on par performance wise with the 7 nanometer ones that Avalon and GMO are cranking out. And it's like this is probably a combination of losing a number of engineers and just misallocating capital, because also at this time you have to remember they started shifting a lot of money into their Sophon AI ASIC line. But at this point, like they're the least efficient hardware out there. And February last year, they attempted to do an optimized 16 nanometer chip, failed. December of last year, they tried to do a 12 nanometer tape out, failed. And in March this year, they tried to do a 10 nanometer tape out and it failed. So each of those times, like it just, they literally pissed away billions of yuan. Like in here, like we look, where is the tape out? And here's Shinobi's famous inability to keep track of things in an article. Okay, but the gist of it is like, those earlier tape outs, they literally lit a few 100 million yuan on fire. And by the time they were trying the 10 nanometer tape out, it was a billion yuan. They just burned. Like the chips failed. The manufacturing process was not successful. The entire chip run was pretty much just a waste of money. And like they're just completely falling behind. I mean, we can look here, the S9, 16 nanometer, 110 watts a terahash. The Inosilicon T2s, 10 nanometers, 80. The ShenMa M10, which is the equipment designed by their former engineer, 16 nanometers, 65 watts a terahash. Like that's almost half the energy draw of the S9. And even going into like their other altcoin ASICs, the L3, their Litecoin chip, 1.6 watts per megahash. The Inosilicon A6, 1.2. Look at the Dash chips. We can see the D3 milliwatts per megahash, 57. The Inosilicon A5, 23. Like the Zcash miner, watts a kilohash. The Z9 from Bitmain, 28. Inosilicon's A9, 12. Their ETH, watts per megahash. The Bitmain E3, 4. Inosilicon A10, 2. I think that this is the Siacoin miner, but the A3, 1,500 watts a terahash. Inosilicon's 320. And even their AI chips, like the latest one is watts per terahash, 10 for the Bitmain model. And for the biggest Chinese competitor, it's 2.8. Like even in the thing that they're trying to do to branch out outside of cryptocurrency mining, they're 3 times less efficient than their nearest competitor. Like they have, like this business is burning to the ground. None of their hardware is more efficient than their competitors at this point. They're sitting on $1 billion of obsolete hardware, 1 million Bcash that they cannot liquidate. There are no buyers for. You like if you dumped 3% of that, you would completely wiped the books clean on Bitfinex. There is no way anybody is stupid enough to buy that OTC. Like you're pretty much just buying a completely illiquid asset. And then here's the figures for the tape out fails. So they actually went back and like their V9 model, which is a 28 nanometer chip. Like it's pretty much what was in the S7. They pissed away millions of dollars producing these. They didn't sell them. Like these are just sitting in a warehouse somewhere. They're not going to be able to sell these. They paid $1 billion or 1 billion yuan for the 12 nanometer tape out attempts. Completely failed. 3 billion yuan for a failed 10 nanometer tape out. Like the past 3 times they've tried to produce more efficient chips, it just completely failed. The entire run of chips are useless and do not work. Like, like it would seriously, like, yeah, Hiroji, like, yes, it pretty much would at this point take the Chinese government buying them out to save them. Like they have taken a business that survived the first really crazy bear market at large market cap values when ASICs were actually a thing. When their only competitor at the time really got burned alive by it. It had a massive opportunity for expansion, massive amounts of capital to throw in R&D to try to actually keep up the pace of innovation. And they fucked it up. Like they completely fucked it up in every single way that you could fuck it up. And even the business that they have, they're trying to pivot out of the cryptocurrency space with, it's not as efficient as competitors in the space. Like I do not see how Bitmain avoids just shrinking into irrelevance, or depending on the level of stupidity Jihan's going to sink to, just going bankrupt.
Yeah, I mean, Bitmain's history, like, I'm glad Samson put this all together and, laid it out for us, because it's one of those things where I bring it up in the meetups in a great example of like how to show that, a group of people coming together can, have their own incentives and sort of guide what they think the direction should be of Bitcoin. And really a good example of with Bcash and Nakamoto Consensus and UASF and BIP91, and the way that all worked out is a great example to discuss, to sort of show like, just Nakamoto Consensus. And similarly, I think Bitmain's history in the mining industry, future players coming into this, like, I don't know, AMD, NVIDIA, GMO, all these guys that are maybe bigger players that are coming into this. I wouldn't be surprised if this history that something that they'll be paying attention to, and, just basically sort of show, like, if you take your eye off the ball of what you're doing, this is a, an industry where you could certainly get your, throat cut and left behind. And I think maybe Bitmain's history is going to serve a twofold purpose now, where they can show some other people coming in the industry that you don't want to start blowing your money this way and that to try and find the new thing that you're going to try and lead in control with. I mean, you kind of have to work within the system, and so it's something that I'm glad Samson brought out and sort of put out a nice graph of all this, because I think that, there's definitely a lesson to be taken from this for all big players coming into the space. Whenever you look at what Bitmain did with their, their little bit of lead they had there for a while with the S7s and S9s, and the way they took it with their own intention and had some misguided thoughts as far as where they should be spending their money, and how exactly that played out in such a terrible way for them, that it could be similarly done in any of these players coming into the field. If they want to come in and try and run the game like Bitmain did, it's history repeats itself, right? If those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. So, I mean, it's something where Bitmain's history is going to be, it's going to be tied into Bitcoin history for a while, just in helping people come to understand what exactly they're doing and, you know, what we're doing here. So yeah, that's a nice thing to put together.
Bitcoin is free market capitalism on steroids. It is the Hunger Games. Compete or you die.
Learning the lesson the hard way.
All right. Moving along, something to worry about if you are a Mac user and think that your fancy, shiny Apple product is completely immune to security threats. It's not. So Kaspersky's lab has found a new strain of cryptojacking malware that is targeting Mac OS in addition to Windows. And this is pretty much being tied to the Lazerus group, which has a lot of purported ties to North Korea and was previously involved in a lot of the phishing attempts and exchange hacks in South Korea that a lot of people are pretty much attributing to North Korea at this point. But this is a pretty solidly engineered attack. And I mean, it just goes to show, like, you have to be paranoid. Like, if you are managing cryptocurrencies, then like, point blank, get a fucking hardware wallet, or you should be managing all of your keys on a completely air-gapped machine that you take very serious care of managing your digital hygiene and transferring things back and forth. Like, it might be annoying, it might take a lot of typo correcting, but you can always sit there and copy out a serialized transaction by hand. Like, it is an option. If you do not take that option and it bites you in the ass, maybe you'll learn that lesson the hard way then. But this was pretty much deployed through a trading application, Celis Trade Pro, from a company, Celis Limited, that was, you know, by all intents and purposes, it looked completely legitimate. Like, it had a valid digital certificate. It had a valid cert for signing software, legit looking domain registration. But when the researchers started digging into things, they couldn't actually find a legitimate registered company at any of the address information provided for the certificate or the domain registry. And so the the trading software was actually, like, completely legitimate. Like, there was no malicious code in the actual software itself. It was just a trading program. And pretty much it would just sit there, it would case your computer, it would actually require manual approval from the attacker. But if you were judged as a worthy target to actually try and hack, it would download malicious code through a software update process. So that initially downloading this program, nothing would get tripped by any software you had, any antivirus. It's a completely legitimate program with no malicious code. And only after downloading it and being deemed by the attacker worthy of being targeted would the update mechanism be used to pull the malicious code onto your system. And so that this was set up in a ridiculously, like, thorough way. Like, your average person, like, no alarm bells would go off until you had already been picked as a target, and then you're shit out of luck. Like, it downloads the actual malware through the update. Shit would happen, and you're scratching your head wondering what the fuck. Like, this looks legitimate. The software is actually signed. The website, the domain registration, everything looks legit. But you got singled out, and you got wrecked. Like, security in this space, like, you have to take it seriously. And if you're not equipped to actually, like, manage or look out for threats like this, then just get a hardware wallet. Like, there are reasons that those things exist. It is so the average non-technical person has some means of defending themselves. But Kaspersky put out a number of advice, and pretty much, like, don't trust code you're running on your system. Don't trust a website just because it looks legitimate. And take every precaution on the bleeding edge you can to actually like manage threat detection, because like these things evolve, they change. You can't just download your Norton antivirus and then assume everything's going to fucking work. And wherever there is the fucking option to do so, use 2FA. Do not use your phone number and a text message, but use some form of 2FA. You can get a YubiKey. You can use an authenticator app that generates one-time change in codes. There are a million things you can do, but have a 2FA set up. Take your security seriously.
And if you want to really be unhackable, use McAfee software.
Oh man. Yeah, it's something where I feel like Apple users sometimes do feel a little bit like they're secure because they know Apple's on top of their security. And yeah, it's we're not in that space. Like, we're in Bitcoin, and you need to be very sure operating within in your Bitcoin. And I mean, some software, if it looks all good, like you're saying, these things evolve, it might not be good, a little bit later down the road. So security is always constantly be reassessing and try and avoid those pitfalls where possible. Like you're saying, use a hardware wallet. There's lots of ways that you can secure your Bitcoin, but just blindly accepting some code, that's a surefire way to lose your Bitcoin.
I mean, it's like you have to take it seriously. Like this entire movement is about personal responsibility and personal sovereignty. And that means you are the line of defense protecting your own assets. Take it seriously, or you're going to get burned and learn a very expensive lesson.
Yeah,
very
just a quick plug.
A very expensive lesson brought to you by North Korea.
And just a quick plug, man, I've been seeing these CoinKite cards all over Twitter, man. I'm super psyched about those. I need to get one, man. And so do some people that need to secure their Bitcoin.
All right. Speaking of watching your own ass, though, one of the rare instances where somebody else will come and save your ass after you didn't take it seriously. The Mt.Gox estate is now accepting claims for Bitcoin creditors. And this does not guarantee you will actually get Bitcoin back, although it does not preclude the possibility, like a bankruptcy proceeding. But there is an online claim filing system. There's actually also in the show notes the actual PDF released by the estate, so you can go through and check that out. You can file through the online system, or if for some reason you are a person on the internet being made aware of this and can't use the internet to file your claim, there is also a method to file through snail mail. You can download the proper forms and fill them out. And the one thing I want to say, if anybody is watching who lost money in Mt.Gox, who did not file for the bankruptcy claim, you can now file for the civil rehabilitation claim. So there is no requirement here that you took part in the bankruptcy proceedings to file a claim for this. You will need your Mt.Gox username and password. If you don't have those, I do believe if you... I never used Mt.Gox, so I'm not really sure about what the KYC procedures were at the time. But if you don't have access to your Mt.Gox username and password, you should be able to go through and file through the snail mail version, and I think the online as well, to try to get access to the filing system without the password. But if you do have your username and password, you should just be able to go on the online claim file system and then file your claim. Again, you do not have to have taken part in the bankruptcy proceedings to file for the civil rehabilitation. So if you had Bitcoin on Mt.Gox, if you had fiat on Mt.Gox, go file. Like, it doesn't matter. You tried to deal with the bankruptcy proceedings, didn't file in time, you can file now. So if you are sitting on losses that you wrote off, you thought you missed the deadline for, go deal with that now. The deadline is October 22nd. You know, get your shit in there and get as much money as you can back.
File those claims.
Make Mark Karpellis's magical tuxedo not so magical.
Yes. And make sure that he does not get money that he does not deserve, being the world's most incompetent PHP developer.
Oh, and just to reiterate, I mean, we've mentioned this before, but just to reiterate that the people who hired Mark Karpellis were stupid enough to do that is private internet access. So if you use that as a VPN, you might want to be a little worried. A little bit.
A little very. All right. Last story of the day. So, some interesting updates going on in Singapore. Their central bank is no. That can go last.
Ah. All right.
Burn through it. 15 minutes left. But Singapore's central bank is partnering with Nasdaq and Deloitte on establishing a system for settling tokenized assets on a blockchain. And so, blockchain. I'm having flashbacks to being accosted by a medical records person last night. But this, I think, is a very big indication of where Nasdaq and Deloitte are going to try to move in domestic markets when regulatory agencies like the SEC finally pull their head out of their ass and stop trying to play gatekeeper. And it's an obvious no-brainer thing when you have a foreign country like Singapore that's been relatively consistent in a positive attitude about this space. It's a pilot program opportunity. You can try to roll these things out there, see how they work in a foreign market, work out all the kinks and the issues with things there, and then use this as an example to pretty much attempt to make the case to roll it out domestically. And so the more these kinds of institutions start looking at applying these things in legacy systems, I think it's just going to make them push harder and harder for integrating public systems like Bitcoin, because it's really just a no-brainer jump. If you can replace your database with a different kind of database and actually realize some serious benefits from that, it's really just a small leap from that to actually realizing much more benefits in a public open system that isn't just plugging one thing out for another to keep centralized records in. And Janine, okay, we can let you do this right now.
Wait. Well, that's not why. First, I want to ask: is it really pronounced Deloitte? That's how you're pronouncing it? I thought it was Deloitte. Which one is the correct pronunciation?
I have no respect for these people. I really don't care if I mispronounce them.
I mean, I've only ever heard Deloitte, so I mean, it might be a similar thing to like Detroit, because I think Detroit is actually a French word that should be pronounced Detroit or something. So if that's the case,
I'm gonna just keep saying Delaware now. I'm gonna do it on purpose.
Okay, because it just sounds like it's like you're saying Delaware and then you like get cut off.
It's Delaware.
All right, final thoughts though. Janine has some awesome news. Go.
Well, I mean, this isn't my final thought. I wanted to say it in place of like Mt.Gox, because this is an example of an exchange you actually should use because it's decentralized. And there was just recently an update that I thought the most important thing was that they added local face-to-face trading. A lot of people were asking for that to help coordinate local trades. So that's pretty cool.
It is indeed. Everybody download, use, fuck local Bitcoins. Fuck their KYC bullshit. We can now completely bypass it with a peer-to-peer system. All right.
So my final thought, I don't have like a tweet or anything thing. I just constantly reassess your security, reassess what you're doing and how you're going about your business and whatever you're doing, man. Because you know, sometimes you get comfortable and you going down the same path you always go on, and you get by a car. So you know, just keep reassessing what you're doing, and you know, if something does happen like that, then just like yeah, take a lesson from it and be like, all right, well, this is where I need to shore up my lines. And when I'm crossing through some of these intersections that are pretty busy, these guys are not really paying much attention to the sidewalks. So reassess what you're doing all the time. That's a final thought.
All right, I'm not gonna have a final thought. I'm gonna have a final rant. So like I said when we started, I went to go you know, have a few drinks with Tone Vase last night because he was in town for this stupid shitcoin blockchain conference thing at the bar.
Gross.
And he got up and wanted to go sit at another table for a little bit. And I just was chatting with this guy I met up there. He just got into Bitcoin, I think, you know, sometime last year. But while Tone went to go, you know, interact with some other people, I was accosted by somebody spewing medical records on the blockchain nonsense, and I wanted to blow my fucking head off. He just like dropped into a seat at the table. It's like, you're here for the blockchain stuff? Hey, I'm here to put medical records on the blockchain. Want to hear me talk about it? And I was too taken aback at just how ballsy and in my face he got that I my inner asshole was just frozen like a deer in the headlights. And so he went on this ridiculous rant about how people's medical records should be on a blockchain because, you know, you're traveling somewhere and have some medical condition and they don't know about it. So it should be on the blockchain so that they can access it and know it. And it's like, how would they do that? Like, how do they know your records on a blockchain, like when you're found somewhere in a foreign country? Like, how does that make sense? Why the fuck do you put that on a blockchain? Like, literally out of my ass. It's like, why not just put it on your phone? You have your phone with you, can be on your phone encrypted. You can give it to them. They'll know there. Or you just put a fucking NFC tag in your fucking hand or something. Or a temporary tattoo. Like, they have tattoos now that will last like a few weeks with ink. Just encode relevant information like, I am a diabetic, I have this disorder, and encode it into a fucking QR code on your fucking hand or something. Like, why how does blockchain make any sense? And the fucked up thing is, me farting ideas out of my ass off the top of my head, every single one, his response, yeah, that does make more sense than a blockchain. But I think in the interim, we should work on the blockchain because we need to do something now because everything sucks. I want to blow my head off.
I heard a similar thing at a event that I will not name about 2 weeks ago. They were specifically arguing that we should put vaccination records into a blockchain. And another person at the same event had made a brilliant statement saying that the one thing that you cannot buy is information. It's like, yeah, this is the kind of shit. I'm serious. They got up and that was something they said is like a profound statement. What's the one thing you cannot buy is information. It's like, I need to go now. So yeah, this stuff is still happening.
Oh my God.
And one person, the woman, what's her name again? Can't even remember. Federal prosecutor
Susan?
got hired by Coinbase. No,
Aaron
not her. Yeah, Aaron Hahn, or no, the Hahn. I'll just call her Hahn. She thinks that birth certificate should go on a blockchain. So like lots of sensitive documents going on the blockchain, not a good idea. Flat out, not good.
You have to learn to have that blockchain bullshit vest on, because it really is like something where, I don't know, it's like a lot of the discussion here is like a lot of that was like headbutting, and there was never anything happening where they would listen to, you know, what Bitcoin is trying to do compared to what they're trying to do. And it's it's some of those things where it's like you can't be just like hard up, like, yeah, that's stupid. I mean, like I've tried to do that route and it just usually breaks down those communications, but I've definitely heard it too, like a couple weeks ago as well. Like I think somebody was telling me about how they should put biometric identity on the blockchain, and they already had a contract with the Mexican military. And that was one of those where I was like, man, if my friends knew about that, I should be punching you. They would be punching you in the face, but I'm just going to sit here and try to have a cordial beer with you and discuss why I think that's a bad idea.
Mm-hmm. All right, Janine, lay the final thought on us.
So my final thought is actually just
Don't you dare insult my new waifu.
Oh god, it's so disgusting. I don't even want that image in my head.
Oh Lord, I don't know what that. Gotta look up that.
So I just I'm in the mood for reading a speech that Julian Assange gave in December 2012 because these days we aren't able to hear much from him because he's in isolation imposed by the Ecuadorian embassy because they're afraid of countries like the United States and other countries that are co-opted by the United States, pressuring them justifiably, possibly, but still, they are bound to the pressure. So I'm going to read some sections from his speech they gave in 2012. Because, he's the opposite of someone like Susanne. And he's also the reason that the Stratfor, he's part of the reason those Stratfor emails are public and that we saw that she was contacting Stratfor. So, yeah. He said, our buildings can only be as tall as their bricks are strong, and our civilization is only as strong as its ideas are true. When our buildings are erected by the corrupt, when their cement is cut with dirt, when pristine steel is replaced by scrap, our buildings are not safe to live in. And when our media is corrupt, when our academics are timid, when our history is filled with half-truths and lies, our civilization will never be just. It will never reach the sky. Our societies are intellectual shantytowns. Our beliefs about the world and each other have been created by the same system that has lied us into repeated wars that have killed millions. You can't build a skyscraper out of plasticine, and you can't build a just civilization out of ignorance and lies. We have to educate each other. We have to celebrate those who reveal the truth and denounce those who poison our ability to comprehend the world that we live in. The quality of our discourse is the limit of our civilization. But this generation has come to its feet and is revolutionizing the way we see the world. For the first time in history, the people affected by history are its creators. And for other journalists and publications, your work speaks for itself, and so do your war crimes. For once we, the people, stop speaking out and stop dissenting, once we are distracted or pacified, once we turn away from each other, we are no longer free. For true democracy is the sum of our resistance. If you don't speak up, if you give up what is uniquely yours as a human being, you surrender your consciousness, your independence, even your sense of what is right and what is wrong. In other words, perhaps without knowing it, you become passive and controlled, unable to defend yourself and those you love. People often ask, what can I do? The answer is not so difficult. Learn how the world works. Challenge the statements, actions, and intentions of those who seek to control us behind the facade of democracy and monarchy. Unite in common purpose and common principle to design, build, document, finance, and defend. Learn, challenge, act now.
Yeah, very well said. Like that's something we all need to pay attention to. It's just the information, the ideas, the structure of all this. It's pretty complicated, but definitely need to dig into it and learn these things.
All right, so last troll for the win. Leave the waifu alone. But yeah, everybody should think about what Janine just read and about where Julian is right now because he had the balls to say things like that. And think about that for a while. And I guess we will see you guys on Wednesday. Toodaloo.
Later, everyone.